welcome back to the channel. It is the semi-final preview and prediction video. We're getting into it because there's a lot to dissect. There's the women's semi-finals and the men's semi-finals. And for, well, some unlikely semi-finalists, that's for sure. We're going to talk through all of them and hopefully get you guys involved as well. So make sure you fire with any questions or comments you might have as usual. What we're going to do is we're going to break down each semi-final. So we'll start with the women's first because they're going to be starting in about 9 or so hours. So that's going to be pretty quick, I would imagine. And for the men's, of course, we do have them the day after. So there's a lot to dissect and really get our teeth stuck into. Let's then start with Rybakina versus Azarenka, and that's how you say her name apparently. So Rybakina versus Azarenka. Let's talk about her route to the semi-finals first, because Rybakina's looked really good. The Wimbledon 2022 champion has been, in my opinion, one of the standout performers of this tournament so far. She's playing tomorrow in the first match in the first semi-final against Victoria Azarenka, the two-time Australian Open champion, of course. She won in 2012 and 2013. So it's been 10 years since she won her last slam, and her 2 Grand Slams have come from the Australian Open. For Rybakina, she is in a different stage of her career. She's early on. She is, like Azarenka was 10 years ago, different style of play. We'll talk about that in a second, though. Let's quickly just break down how she's looked and her results so far. David says, I hope Rybakina wins at this point and would be a great rivalry with Iga if they're trading slams like this. Just what the tour needs. Also, Elena is a great person. I don't know much about her personally, but yeah, she's got a fantastic game. I want Sabalenka to win, though, David, and I don't think it's going to be a case of 2 people dominating on the WTA side. I don't think we're going to have Stef and Rybakina dominating. I think you're going to have those 2, maybe Sabalenka, hopefully someone like a Caroline Garcia, and Jabeur. Like, I feel like there's a lot of different players that could and will win Grand Slams over the next 2 years. I don't think it's going to be a big 2 or big 3 situation, in my opinion. You might be right, and maybe that will happen, but especially on some of the other surfaces as well. So on clay, I think Swiatek is obviously very strong. Rybakina isn't particularly, from what I know. So whereas Sabalenka's got a pretty all-court game. So we'll see. Gary says, hello, Fazan. You guys seem to be really high on Ryba. I'm actually going to believe Saba's time has come. Yeah, that's my prediction. That was my prediction at the start of the tournament. I predicted her to win in my bracket, Arina Sabalenka, and I'm still going to stick with that. I still think she is going to win, honestly. But yeah, we'll break that down in more detail in a second. David says, I don't think it'll be consistent trading, but it's looking good for big titles in general to be traded. I got you. And Gary says, and David, Saba is a pretty good person. She is, yeah. She seems like a very fun and bubbly personality, very different to her on-court personality. She's very, aggressive in her style of play, very loud and competitive. Off the court, she's very kind of just bubbly, I think is probably the right word for it. And David says, Rybakina has a huge game which will make everyone struggle. She does. So let's break it down then. So Rybakina, in terms of her route to the semi-final, she played Cochiretto, Huvan in the first 2 rounds, beat both of them in straight sets, beat Danielle Collins, which I thought was a good win in the 3rd round in 3 sets. And then, of course, the marquee win over Iga Swiatek, 6-4, 6-4. And she was pretty dominant. I think the scoreline was a bit flattering in a way to Swiatek, if I'm being honest with you. I think Rybakina played really, really well. And we'll talk a little bit about why she's so dangerous in a second as well, because I'd like to really dig into her skill set. Ostapenko was a good win as well. The Ostapenko, I think, was a little bit all over the place, if I'm being honest. I wasn't particularly impressed with her. I still think Ostapenko is not quite getting the most out of her game. I think, if you look at, say, a Taylor Fritz or a Cam Norrie, I feel like those guys are really getting the most out of the game on the men's side. And I feel like Ostapenko is completely opposite on the women's side. She's almost like how Kyrgios was a few years back in the way that she approaches the game at times. Ghost, I'm glad Pagula isn't here. What, Ghost? What is your obsession with Pagula? I thought you're just doing it to tease me, to just annoy me. Gary says Saba is as sweet as a girl could be, completely different person on the court. Agreed. Rybakina and Sabalenka's runs are the most impressive, says David. Yeah. Gary says Ryba's win over Iga was a significant moment in women's tennis, I think. Do you think? I wasn't surprised. I actually picked it in my bracket. My bracket on the men's side has been like pretty much destroyed. I think I had Stef going deep, so the semis I think I had him making, if I'm not mistaken, and making the final actually. So that might go well on that half of that draw. But on the women's side, I've done pretty well. I had Rybakina beating Swiatek. I had Sabalenka making the final. She's made the semi, so I'm winning it obviously. So we'll see. Ghost says Ostapenko was robbed. Every single shot was out. Yeah, she really doesn't trust the automatic line judges. She genuinely doesn't. She's so cynical about it. And look, that's fine. I mean, I guess it is relatively new technology still, so there might be some errors, I would imagine, but probably still better for the game. No? I think so. Okay, in terms of Rybakina, she has had some very interesting stats. So listen to this. Elena Rybakina enters the Australian Open semi-final against Victoria Azarenka as the women's tournament leader in aces at 35. But that's not the most impressive stats. These are unreturned first serves at 53%. 53% of unreturned first serves as an average throughout this tournament. And first serve points won, 81%. That is absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Exactly, yeah. Ghost says Rybakina is a slam champ, so always has a chance against Iga. Yeah. I'll touch upon the Iga comments in a second, just because I want to really try and break this down. For Azarenka, Rybakina, I guess, talking about her run is very impressive, and I've just given you a little bit of a stat there. But what's more impressive for me is Azarenka. A win over Rybakina would mean that Victoria Azarenka would come into her first final at the Australian Open, of course, in 10 years, given she won it 10 years ago, and improve her main draw win-loss record to an impressive 48-12 at 80%. So that's a success rate of 80%. It's Rybakina. Got you. Rybakina. What was I saying? Rybakina, right? Yeah. Cool, Rybakina. Got it. Okay. So that, I mean, she loves the Australian Open. I always made the joke that for Victoria Azarenka, she is so present at the Australian Open, and then she just goes missing after the Australian Open all the way up until the US Open. It's so funny. Absolutely love it. She's there, of course, the tournaments in and around them, but Roland Garros and Wimbledon, she's like, don't fancy it. And if she is there, she's going out early. She's going out early most likely. So interesting. So for Rybakina, nearly caught myself out there. She is the favorite for sure. In terms of Victoria Azarenka, let's quickly go through her run to the semi-finals. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about it from a more technical standpoint, because I'm interested to know what your guys' thoughts are in terms of how they match up style-wise as well. So for Azarenka, she beat Pagula in the quarterfinals, which I thought was an impressive win. I had Pagula going deep. In fact, I think I had her making the final to play Sabalenka. I also had her, Azarenka also beat Zhu in 3 sets, also beat Keys, Podoroska in straight sets, Kenyon in straight sets. So some good wins there from Azarenka. Now, against Pagula, I think what she did really well was stick with her from the back of the court in the baseline exchanges and almost outlast and outpower her from the back of the court. Interestingly, for Azarenka, I think her movement on the surface is very good as well. She clearly feels at home on this type of surface, and it does show. It really does show. In terms of her serve, she's not the biggest of servers, Azarenka, but she backs it up relatively well on the ground stroke. She does. I have to say, because what I would say, in my opinion, is that if you look at, say, the Pagula match, she only had to save 4 break points, and she saved 2 out of 4. For Pegula, she had 13 break points. Now, Azarenka's biggest strength is her return. So this could be a really, really good matchup, in my opinion. For the sole purpose being, or sole reason being that Rybakina has the best serve at the moment on tour, I would say. She has the best serve in the tournament. And we've got Azarenka as one of the better returners, if not arguably the best returner in the tournament so far. So that's going to be a massive matchup. It really is. I think we're really going to get to see what Azarenka can do against her. They've actually only played once at Indian Wells in March last year. And 2-love was the scoreline. So straight sets for Rybackana. Indian Wells, Azarenka does like that tournament as well, so that's a good win. It's on a surface she really likes. So yeah. Ghost says, point of order, Pegula is pronounced Pigula. Is it? I don't know if people are taking the mic now. I know Gary is it, but if you... you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to the comments in a second and get through my preview and prediction, because I feel like I'm going to end up cracking up at some of these comments. So let's try and avoid this. Okay, so for Rybackana, right, what I would say is against Azarenka, her biggest weapon is going to be her serve, but Azarenka needs to try and nullify that. Now, the only way she's going to be able to do that is by getting a good read on the Rybackana serve. With her experience, she may be able to, but the stats don't really go in her favor. That's going to be the biggest battle, I think, for Azarenka, is trying to break serve. I think on her serve, she needs to be careful, because what Rybackana did really well against Swiatek is she actually didn't take the ball early. That was a really interesting stat, right? Really, really interesting stat. And for anyone that hadn't watched the match, you might have thought that she was taking the ball early, Rybakina. She was taking it early and beating Swiatek by rushing her from the back of the court. In fact, what she was doing is, rather than taking it early and potentially feeling a bit uncomfortable, not being able to hit through the ball as cleanly, she was actually striking the ball a bit later, waiting for the ball to come to a more comfortable height for her, almost waist height, rather than taking it at, say, shoulder height, and she would give herself that extra time, and then she would power those ground strokes from the back of the court. And she has enough power that the trade-off works in that sense, because what she can do is, and what she was doing is, she was managing to almost blow Swiatek away from the back of the court in the baseline exchanges. And despite her movement not being quite as good as Swiatek's, she was dictating the rallies by giving herself that extra time in them. She gave herself that extra split second, which meant that she was able to completely dominate those baseline exchanges. And Swiatek, I think, wasn't expecting that. She wasn't expecting Rybakina to have so much success from the back of the court. And one thing that really, to me, is impressive about her game is her backhand as well. I think on the women's tour, I think it's safe to say, and I don't know what you guys think, but my feeling is on the women's tour, the backhands on the women's tour, generally, if we're talking about quality in comparison to their forehands, the gap is a lot smaller between people's forehands and backhands than on the men's tour. I feel like on the men's tour, the forehand, say if we're talking about a metric out of 10, right? I would say on the men's side, the average is, say for a forehand is 7.5, and for a backhand is maybe like 7, I think is what we saw on the metrics that I showed the other day in the quarterfinals. For women's, I reckon it's more like 7.3 forehand and 7.1, 7.2 backhand. Like, I genuinely think there are quite a few women on the tour where their backhands are actually better than their forehands. Now, that's not really the case on the men's tour. There's not as many proportionally. But what that means is you almost tend to get a bit more of a balanced display from the back of the court on the baseline exchanges. For example, we see some of the people we'll get onto, of course, Tsitsipas and Djokovic later, but they tend to dictate and dominate with their forehands. In the women's game, that is still the case as well in instances, but they have a lot more faith, I think, in their backhands, and these are two good examples. Azarenka and Rybakina will trade pretty consistently from the back of the court, backhand to backhand. And I think what that will mean is we will potentially see who breaks down first. And I'd have a feeling that if this was Azarenka 10 years ago, I might be saying that, okay, maybe it's a case that Rybakina might have her work really cut out for her. But I just think it's going to be really hard for Azarenka to return that serve as well. I mean, look, Swiatek's a fantastic returner of serve, and she struggled a huge deal. So the fact that can Azarenka do better? Maybe, but only marginally, I would say, in my opinion. I think she needs to mix it up, Azarenka. I think she needs to add an element of slice and dice as well. I think Rybakina likes being in rhythm. She likes being able to feel the ball and I guess know what ball's going to come back to her. She knows that, okay, look, if I'm just going to get a whole host of flat topspin ground strokes, then, and I know, for example, if I go into her backhand, she's going to trade cross court with me. She then gets comfortable and she sets herself early, or sets herself mentally early anyway, maybe not just physically. Whereas if Azarenka is slicing on that backhand side, she's hitting drop shots, she's trying to find good angles, she might end up putting Rybakina in uncomfortable positions where she might then struggle to feel comfortable in those exchanges. And that's what Azarenka has to do. There's no point trying to out-hit her from the back of the court. That's not going to happen. She's not going to be able to out-serve her. She's not going to be able to hit with more power than her and win those baseline exchanges with pure power alone. She needs a bit of guile. She needs a bit of intelligence, and she has that. She's going to have to use that to full effect, I think, against Rybakina, and use that experience if she's going to come out on top here. For Rybakina, it's going to be a case of serving consistently, a high percentage of first serves. At times, we've seen that dip a little bit. The second serve is pretty good, but obviously on the first serve, as I said, she's serving at, I think it was 85% or something. First serve points won. Let's have a look, actually. I've got it here. 81% and 53% unreturned first serves. And that's a ridiculous stat. So if I was her, I'd be doing my best to take my time on serve and make sure I make that first strike. And then backing it up, she's become a lot better, especially on that forehand side. And she's not scared as well to transition when needed. I think Azarenka needs to do that as well. I think she needs to mix it up, come to the net. She's pretty good in the net. She's got decent hands. She's got a decent drop shot, and she slices pretty well as well. So, in my opinion, that's what I would like to see from her. In terms of prediction, I think I've got Rybakina winning, and probably in straight sets, or I'm going to go Rybakina in straight sets. I just think it's going to be really hard for Azarenka to make inroads on that serve. And if she does, Rybakina is actually a pretty accomplished returner herself from what I've seen. So I think it's going to be difficult. But let's wait and see. Okay, let's bring up Sabalenka and Linette. Before I do, I'll get some of your comments because I don't want to fall massively behind on them. I appreciate all your guys' comments. So let's quickly go through those first. Let's have a look. Here we go. David says the draw really screwed over Iga. If she played Rybakina later, I think she battles 3-3, maybe. Guys, so what I'm saying is we're done thinking Iga is going to win everything, at least for now. Yeah, I mean, I didn't think she was going to win everything this year. I just think it wasn't sustainable for her to continue to win at that rate. It's impossible. No one's done that really on the men's or women's side. We've seen maybe 2 or 3 people do it, but for one player to just dominate that much, I mean, for her to, she won 2 out of the last 3 slams, right? Let's exclude the Barty one because Barty was playing. So since Barty's retired, she won 2 out of the 3 slams. It's going to be 2 out of 4 because she's not going to win this one, of course. She's out. Realistically, I think she'll win 1 slam this year, at least. I can't see her winning more than 2. But I could see her winning 2. I could see her winning Roland Garros in the US Open again. I think those 2 are her best bet. I think Wimbledon is going to take some time. I think she needs to adapt her game a little bit on the grass, and her movement as well is not quite up to scratch on the grass as much as it is on the other surfaces. She is a Wimbledon junior champ, though, so she clearly has some, she has some level of comfort on the grass, just probably not as much on the clay or now on the hard courts, because on the grass courts, you just don't get to practice as much. That's just unfortunately, that is the little bit of a shame, I think, that we have with that grass court. So it's not even a swing; it's like a little section of the year. I really wish there were more matches played on grass, but it is very weather dependent, of course. David says, but overall, ego on faster hard courts is not the finished article. Yep, I agree. That's a good point, Gary. Rybackana is the least celebrated champion in recent memory. They put her on court 13 for opening day, for Pete's sake. Yeah, I agree. David says, for Andre's sake, very good. Andre Agassi, Pete Sampras, I got you. I was going to say Christ's sake, but he and I aren't. Okay, interesting. Gary says, David, certainly I think ego can still improve, but I never thought her game was something the rest of the players couldn't overcome. Yeah, agreed. Last say, I'm going to ignore that comment because it's just a troll. David says, there's always been weakness, but the fact that she won 2 slams while blatantly struggling against certain game styles show how she'll dominate the game. Go says, Saba could have a good serve. She didn't get so many double faults. Her serve has been very, very good this tournament. I know in her last match she served 9 doubles, but that's the most I think she's served in the whole tournament. She's been serving around 4 or 5, and then a lot of aces, a lot of unreturnables. She's looked very, very good, if I'm being honest with you. I've been quite impressed with how she's been serving. She's been very, very consistent, and it's made a massive difference to her game, like no doubt. Absolutely no doubt. So that has been a massive it's just been it's been incredible to see because I think her resurgence after a very difficult 2022 has been what's impressed me the most. She, of course, had issues from a mental standpoint, given what happened outside of tennis as well, being Belarusian. And then, she had a dip in form. The double faults were really flowing. Now, this year, what's happened is she's become rejuvenated. She's backing her game. I think there's a ridiculous stat going around where she's won the highest percentage of points. Sorry, she has the highest percentage of winners for points won. So the highest percentage of winners for points won, I think it's nearly 50%. She's way in front of everyone as well. Unbelievable. That is absolutely mind-boggling. That's a ridiculous stat. I mean, she's in front of everyone. You think of, say, a Rublev or someone extremely... Look at this, 47.52%. She's hit 163 winners from a total of 343 total points won. The next best is 39.86%, which is Garcia. Rublev is at 39.18%. So she's a good nearly 8% more than Caroline Garcia. That is ridiculous. 47.52% of her points have come from winners. Unbelievable. I mean, that is ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous. Jusika? Who's Jusika? Oh, okay. I don't know. Maybe that's a troll from David. David said she did serve her way out of trouble versus Vekic. She did. Azarenka's return is good. Yep. I'm high on that. Gary, I think. Yep. Gary says, don't you think Saba now has the best ground strokes in the game from both sides? Yeah, I think, given in this tournament, yes. I don't want to say in the women's game yet. I think we need to give it a year. And see where she's at. I'd like to really get an idea of how consistent she's going to be, because I think it's very easy for someone, like we were talking about Zverev having the best baseline game. I think it was after the Olympic win. He went on a really good run. Just looked really, really good, Alexander Zverev. And look, in the end, it lasted a few months, and then he unfortunately went back to being very conservative. For Sabalenka, she's never going to be conservative, but the errors could start to flow a lot more. She could go off the boil a lot. We just don't know. But what I will say is her ground strokes and the way she plays is very much linked to how she is feeling mentally. Now, that's the case for every player, but I feel like even more so with her. I feel like for her emotions and how she's feeling generally really has a big effect on her game. If she's feeling confident in her game, she's feeling comfortable, and she feels happy about how she's playing, it's really reflected in the way that she ultimately plays in the end. There are some players that can block it out. And I think, your big three, for example, on the men's side, they do that. I think she's getting there. The level of maturity is clearly a lot higher than it was in the past. And I have been very impressed with her this tournament, but I don't want to pass judgment on that too soon. But she's looked good. Basse says, Rune couldn't beat Rublev, who know at Ragdoll. What does that tell you about Rune? Rune is a good player, Basse, to be honest with you. And he beat Novak in Paris. He had match points against Rublev. He just didn't convert to break up in that fifth set. Rublev a bit more experienced. Look, I mean, I think he would have given Novak a better game. I don't think he would have won, though. That's my honest opinion. Okay, I'm going to leave that Stef comment for later when we talk about the men's. Gary says, Fazan, Rybackana is a choice, but anything can happen when you're someone named Vika and you've won the tournament twice. Agreed. Ghost says, I'm rooting for Linette. I can't help myself. I love me an underdog. Yeah, let's talk about that then. Let's get into that. Let's get into the second semi-final. So we've got Aryna Sabalenka we've just been talking about and how good she's looked, and that huge and impressive figure, 47.52% of her points have come from winners. Unbelievable. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. I mean, watching her highlights and watching her matches, it's like winners left, right, and center. It's very entertaining. She's an entertaining player to watch, that's for sure. In terms of runs to the semi-final, let's quickly go through it. So Linette beat Sharif in straight sets. This was a really impressive win over Kontaveit, who by ranking should be beating her, but Linette's been very solid. And I have to say, with the introduction, and I think she's relatively new, Radwanska, in the Linette box, if I'm not mistaken. She is perfect. She is tailor-made to help with the coaching of Magda Linette. They have very similar games in the way that they counterpunch, or I guess Radwanska is now retired, but she used to be an incredible counterpuncher. Linette is also the same, and I saw some very distinct similarities between the two players when I saw Linette play against Pliskova this morning. And one of those things was the way that she was able to redirect the ball early and win points. And she also hit this ridiculously good forehand slice for a winner, an angled winner. And it wasn't like she was rushed. She just chose to play it. And it was close to the tram line. She won the point. It was a very, very good shot. And you don't really see it that much on the men's side. If I'm being honest with you, it's not a shot that is used regularly, especially when you're in a comfortable position. You can hit a topspin forehand or a flatter forehand. That's what they'll go for. They only really hit the forehand slice if they're in trouble and they have to defensively get it back into the point. On the women's side, though, they utilize it more, and I actually really like it because it's an added tool to use. And it also, like, for example, if you can hit a backhand slice and you're happy to hit your backhand slice, why would you also not hit a forehand slice at times to try and mix things up? I think it's very tough for it to be a very good weapon, but someone like Magda Linette does make it work for her. And we saw Harmony Tan use it against Serena Williams last year, and she won by playing that style of tennis. Linette's not as extreme as that, but she's able to mix it up as well. And I like that about her game. And I think that's why I picked her to beat Pliskova, because I thought she would frustrate her. Despite Pliskova having a winning head-to-head, I had a feeling that Linette would come out on top, and she did in the end. She beat Alexandrova in straight sets as well, and Caroline Garcia in straight sets. And same with Pliskova. I mean, this run here from Kontaveit to Pliskova is really good. And the fact that she's won her last three matches in straight sets, to me, is an incredible feat. If you look at the players on show, Pliskova, who is a former Grand Slam finalist, Caroline Garcia just won the WTA finals. Alexandrova had a really good 2022. She's beaten some top players. For Sabalenka, it's been pretty smooth sailing. No drop sets, and I guess that would be the real test. If she drops the first set against Magda Linette, how does she react? But she's had it all her own way, beating Martinkova in straight sets, Rogers, Mertens, Bencic, and Vekic. she's looked really good. She's blown people away, and we, of course, were talking about the winners. So, yeah, let's finish up then talking about this preview and prediction for this second women's semi-final. And then we're going to go on to the men's, where I know a lot of you are itching to talk about. But for Sabalenka, as I said, she's been dominant in these matches. Now, we have to talk about how they match up stylistically. But before we do, let's just very briefly talk about the head-to-head. So they've played each other twice. Sabalenka's won both matches, so in straight sets as well. And that was in 2018 and 2021. So they haven't played for a couple of years. Now, this Linette will be at a career-high ranking of number 22 when in the live rankings currently. So this is probably the best she's ever played. For Sabalenka, is this the best she's ever played? Maybe. So I think we're going to get a really good match. In terms of how this match is going to be won or lost, and then I'll get to your guys' comments. Keep them coming, please, the comments. Do not think that I will address everyone's comments and questions, so make sure you answer as many as you want. That's what the whole point of this stream is to do, is to go through the preview and predictions, but also make sure that you guys get a say as well. So for Linette, there's a couple of really important points, I think, that she needs to make sure she's following throughout the whole match. And the first is a high first serve percentage, because if her first serve percentage is low, Sabalenka will absolutely rip the second serve return. And Linette's second serve is not quite good enough, I don't think, to win a high percentage of second serve points. I think she'll struggle. I genuinely think she will struggle a lot with the second serve return points. I think she's going to struggle to win a lot of points on them. Whereas I feel for Sabalenka, she's going to be licking her lips at the second serve. She really will. Even on the first serve, I can see her causing Linette trouble, because she's just got great racket speed and timing. And I think her return is improved a great deal. We know how good her serve is, but her return is also a fantastic weapon. And it's really improved as well. She's also got a lot more time. The balls are a bit more dead at this tournament. I know the courts are still quick, as we've seen. And sometimes when Sabalenka's playing, I genuinely think the ball is like blurry. She's hitting the ball so hard at times. And that's from someone who watches a lot of men's tennis as well. But yeah, so for Linette, I think she needs to mix things up. She needs to make sure that Sabalenka isn't feeling comfortable in the baseline exchanges. So she needs to chop it up, really. And that means, when I mean chop it up, I mean hit that backhand slice, hit that forehand slice I talked about earlier, hit those angles. You know, she shouldn't be trying exactly like how I was talking about Azarenka against Sabalenka, Azarenka against Rybakina, trying to change things up, mix things up, and not try and out hit her from the back of the court. I think for Linette, even more so, she shouldn't try and out hit Sabalenka from the back of the court, because Sabalenka arguably is more powerful, and I think Linette is even more underpowered than Azarenka. But what she does have to her advantage is a good shot tolerance from the back of the court, and also an intelligence about her. She finds really good angles. Her backhand on the line is probably a signature shot, I would say. So what I would do if I was her, I would try my best to make it uncomfortable for Sabalenka. Don't just hit down the middle of the court and expect to get Sabalenka to make a mistake and just rally with her. No, try and be the one to dictate first. And that's what she did against Pliskova. She changed direction first. When they got caught in the backhand-to-backhand exchanges or forehand-to-forehand exchanges, she knew she was going to lose out because she's underpowered. So eventually, if she didn't break down their shot tolerance first, then what would happen is she would end up giving away a shorter ball for the opponent to attack. So what she did is she said, okay, I'm going to be clever and take the ball on early and go line and try and get out of that pattern. Then what she did quite nicely was also try and transition to the net at the right times. I was impressed with her willingness to come forward. Sometimes the approaches were a bit short. She's going to have to really make sure she nails those approach shots. The approach shots she hits to Sabalenka have to be on point. They can't be half court and not in the corners. I think she needs to make sure that she's putting a bit of extra mustard on those. It's going to be a balancing act because she doesn't want to hit unforced errors, of course, and that then completely contradicts the whole purpose of coming forward and trying to finish off points effectively at the net and transitioning well. On return, Linette struggled a little bit with Pliškova's serve when she made a lot of first serves. So she's going to have to hope that Sabalenka doesn't make a lot of first serves, if I'm being honest with you. The one thing she did well, though, is she read the second serve well against Pliškova, and she did cash in at times when she needed to. She also pushed and had a lot of breakpoint opportunities against her. So if Sabalenka doesn't hit if she's not hitting at 60% or more first serves in, then she might get a look in Linette because of some good second serve returning. For Sabalenka, there's a real easy way for her to win this, and that's to make sure that she is serving at 60% plus first serves in, and also she plays how she's played. And when I mean she should just play how she's played, I mean she needs to have that confidence and arrogance about her. She needs to back her shots. I don't think she should, shy away at all from trying to hit how she's been hitting. But what she's done is, I think, and the difference with her game at the moment is that the aggression has been more calculated. She's not tried to go for outrageous shots from behind the baseline, 2 meters behind the baseline. What she's done is she's broken the opponent down in the ground strokes, realized that I've got bigger ground strokes than you. I can actually go down the middle or go deeper in and maybe not so close to the lines. Break you down, get the shorter ball, and then I'll attack. Because I know that I can, inside the baseline, my margin for error is a lot bigger. And she's been very, very good at that, I have to say, Sabalenka. She's been a lot more patient in those rallies, and then she's finished off the point. And a lot of the points have been her hitting into open court at times. So I'm hoping that she does the same, because I want both players to be at their best in this one. So in my opinion, for Sabalenka, I think it's really in her hands, and that sounds harsh to the net because she's a very good player. She's accomplished. She has a good skill set. I just think with the power and ability that Sabalenka has, she's also adding the drop shot to her game. She's a pretty good volleyer as well. She doesn't volley as much as I think she should. I think she's got good hands in the net. She plays a lot of doubles and has won Grand Slams in doubles. That's not to say that she's got great transition game, but clearly her volleying generally is good. But can she transition and volley well? I'm not 100% sure how well she can, but it's something she should add to her game as someone who's got such big ground strokes and such big serves. It's a natural progression. So she might not do that in this tournament, but going forward, we've seen Swiatek try to do it, try and add it to her game. I think for Sabalenka, is also something she needs to do. But in terms of just looking at it from this match and from a short-term point of view, I think Sabalenka to win. I think in straight sets. That's not to say that Linette can't win this. I genuinely think, maybe a lot of people slept on her. I slept on her in terms of I'm sleeping on her now in terms of this, right? And what I would say is that, in all honesty, she could easily prove everyone wrong. Because I think a lot of people are backing Sabalenka. A lot of people didn't back her against Pliškova. I did. Someone here says, hey, what are the chances to win for Linette? I think she's got a decent chance, but if I'm being honest with you, my opinion is that Sabalenka will win in 2. I think if Linette is to win this, I think she has to win the first set to give herself a good chance. Because I do think what could end up happening is if she wins the first set by playing some really good tennis and frustrating Sabalenka could potentially go off the boil. She's lost a lot of semi-finals. This is her 4th semi-final. She's never made a final of a Grand Slam, Sabalenka. This is her 2nd consecutive Grand Slam semi-final. She's her 4th overall. She's had semi-finals where she's gone into the favourite. She had the semi-final against Fernandez at the US Open 2021 tournament. She was the favourite there. She lost. She was the favourite against Pliškova at Wimbledon 2021. She lost. Last year, of course, in the US Open, she wasn't the favourite against Swiatek, but she was 5-3 up in the final set. Probably should have won that. She didn't. So, look, I mean, those are 3 out of the 4. The 4th one, I can't remember off the top of my head. But what I would say is I think she's going to break the duck. I think the first set, to me, is quite an important one. Because if she wins it, I don't see her losing. If she loses the first set, I still think she wins it. But I think at the moment the percentage is 70-30 for Sabalenka. If she loses the first set, I think it then becomes 55-45 for Sabalenka. I think Sabalenka is still the favourite, but not by much. And that's how much importance I place on that first serve in terms of how it might affect the mental state of Sabalenka. What do I think of Rybackana Azarenka? I went for Rybakina in straight sets, but who knows? Who knows? Okay, let's get to some of the comments then on this specific match. Gary says, Fazan, what you just said about Sabalenka and winners just reinforces my argument that she has the best ground strokes on the WTA now. By the way, guys, thank you everyone for tuning in. Really do appreciate it. Remember to that like button and do subscribe if you are new. Really do appreciate everyone joining in. What I would also say is we are going to be doing the men's semi-final preview in a second. We haven't touched on that yet, so we are doing the women's. We're just wrapping up the women's now. But yeah, please hit that like button, the big thumbs up button, and subscribe if you are new. Both are free, don't cost you anything, and it really does help us out. Thank you. Okay, right, let's then go through the rest of the comments. Gary says, I agree, Fazan, that Saba's game could be fleeting. Only the big three and Serena defied that, and even Serena was a second-tier player for a number of years at that end. Magda is a player that's hard to root against. She won me over in Charleston last year. She won 2 3-set matches on the same day. We appreciate you too. Magda just get that first serve in. Yeah, it's always psychologically sound strategy, and yes, it can keep Saba from crushing the returns. A lights out first serve is not a prerequisite. Exactly, it's not. It's really not. It's about backing it up nicely as well. Saba in straights is the money pick. I think this tournament comes down to one thing: Saba's mental state. If it's strong, she's near unbeatable at the moment. Me and Gary are on the same page. Okay, let's get to the men's, because this is the one that I think a lot of people are wanting to go through. And I don't blame you guys. Guys as well, there's like 80 of you in the chat. There's only 15 likes. You guys are being naughty. Please hit that like button, please, if you haven't done so already. It really, really does help us out. I promise it does. I'm not lying, I promise. And then do also leave a rating or review if you haven't done so already. Okay, let's talk about one of the GOATs, Novak Djokovic against Tommy Paul. This is a very, very interesting match. I think, are there any comments on Tsitsipas and Paul yet? Let's have a look. If so, I'll go through those and then I'll do my preview. And then we can also go through the rest of them after. I think there was some on Tsitsipas, weren't there? But not on Djokovic. I mean, some people saying they had a weak draw. I mean, you can only play who's in front of you. So, I think that is what it is. Well, Shelly says, Linette, no problem. I'm liking that, Shelly. I'm liking that. Let's see in the chat, by the way. This is interesting. 50% of you have gone for Rybackana to win the title. So you guys are saying, in your opinion, she's going to be the one to win. She's the one to win it. Interesting. Very, very interesting. I'm not sure, if I'm being honest with you. My pick is Sabalenka. I picked her before the tournament as well, but yeah, we'll have to see. Okay, let's then delve into this matchup. This, to me, if I'm being honest with you, when we talk about Tsitsipas, Khachanov, I feel like that's a lot more interesting, and I'll tell you why. Because Djokovic, Tommy Paul, is a little bit of a mismatch. That's not to say that Tommy Paul can't have some success against Djokovic. He might win a set. He might even win 2. I can't see him winning this, if I'm being honest with you. And I'll explain why in a second. But my first thing is, Tommy Paul is playing his first ever Grand Slam quarterfinal. This is, to me, a very, very new experience for him. And I know he played his first quarterfinal. Sorry, he's playing his first semi-final even. I think I said quarterfinal before. He played his first ever quarterfinal against Ben Shelton. He looked really good. But Ben Shelton was also playing his first ever quarterfinal. They were both having a new experience. And I think also he knows Ben Shelton quite well from my understanding, both being American. I don't think he was maybe mentally challenged as much playing it. Now, playing Djokovic generally is a mental challenge in itself. To then play your first Grand Slam semi-final against him and your first ever Grand Slam semi-final period is a really hard task. And if he was to overcome this, if I'm being honest with you, if he is to overcome this, this is going to be one of the biggest upsets I've seen in a long time. Because Tommy Paul isn't someone who's come through like a Sinner or an Alcaraz and he's really blown his way through. He's been around a while. He's 24, 25 now. He was a really good decorated junior champion. He hasn't quite hit the heights he probably would have expected coming out of the juniors. And now he's starting to find some of that, some of that form that he probably has been searching for a few years, which is great. And I'm really happy for him. And he's a very solid player, no doubt. But does he have the weapons? Does he have the skill set to beat Novak Djokovic in Novak Djokovic's favorite Grand Slam, a slam he's won 9 times? The answer to that is probably not. And I'm not trying to put a downer on people who are Tommy Paul fans or on people that are American fans and they think that, oh, come on, Tommy, maybe you can do it. But I was talking about percentages earlier. I think if I'm being generous, he's got a 10% chance. I think he's got a 5% chance, honestly. Let's go through some of the comments and then I'll delve into their routes to the semi-finals and then talk about it more from an analytical point of view. So Gary says, Tommy says he's basically itching to play Novak. I agree that you want to measure yourself against the best, but I'm not sure he knows the hurricane he's facing. To be honest with you, I didn't hear, but what I did hear, and this was a little bit alarming, was he was saying, oh, I can't believe I'm here. I'm really happy to be here. Now, Casper Ruud did something similar against Nadal. He said after and before, I'm really happy to be here. It's a pleasure. Forget that. If I'm being honest with you, the only way that these guys are going to beat Nadal or Djokovic is by doing a Kyrgios in a way, and I'm not saying be exactly like Kyrgios, but I think they need to stop respecting these guys so much. Yeah, respect them after the match. Before the match, as you're prepping and during it, you should have almost contempt for these guys. You need to be competitive. And instead of being in awe of this person, I know it's hard to put that to the back of your mind, but you need to be saying to yourself, and these guys need to be saying to themselves, I'm good enough to beat them. Now, deep down, if they don't believe they're good enough to beat them, they're never going to beat them. And I'm being honest with you, but I think they're not aliens. They're not robots. They're still humans at the end of the day. They can be beaten. They don't have a 100% win record in any single year. So, yes, they are mammoth legends of the game. Djokovic, Nadal, Federer. Federer's now retired, though. These two left. Yes, they are fantastic. They're formidable opponents, and they still are going to go into every match they play probably the favorite. But they do and can be beaten. Now, I don't know how many players on tour genuinely believe that they can beat them. And that, to me, is the biggest issue. We saw it with Dimitrov. And I think this is a good time to go through Djokovic's run to the semi-finals. And then, Jane, I know you've asked some questions as well and comments. We'll get to those. Shelley as well. Keep the comments and questions coming, guys. We're going to get through all of them. So Djokovic played Carabao in the first round, won in straight sets very comfortably. He played quad. The only set he's dropped was against the French player. Pretty surprising, I guess you could say, given who he played in the other matches. Lost the tiebreaker. I think that was the match where he encountered a heckler as well. He wasn't happy with it, understandably. Also felt the hamstring a bit. He obviously came into this tournament with that hamstring issue. He did have that issue up into the Dimitrov match. He's still strapped, but it seems like he's had some injections or pain relief or something, some kind of treatment on it. And he's moved, in my opinion, I don't think he's moving at 100%, but he's probably moving at 90 to 95%. And that's better than almost everyone on tour. It's better than everyone left in the draw anyway, that's for sure. And then he beat Dimino in straight sets. He beat Dimitrov in straight sets and Rublev in straight sets. Now, what I want to talk about, when we're talking about mental fortitude and application, Dimitrov was... Look, I'm going to be very, very, very harsh here, you might say, to Grigor Dimitrov. And I don't mean to be, because I genuinely love the way that he plays. He has a fantastic, genuinely, he has a fantastic game. It is a pleasure to watch at times. And there's a reason why he's called Baby Federer, because his game is very graceful to watch. And I know he doesn't like that game, and he doesn't like that name, sorry, even. And I understand that. But it's just because he had a really attractive and aesthetically pleasing game on the eyes. He did not apply himself whatsoever against Djokovic. I mean, it was a shocker against Djokovic. He was playing against someone who was clearly injured and hampered. He did not take advantage whatsoever. It was a really, really poor display from Dimitrov. And I have to say, it was a shocker. And I'm just having a look here at the head-to-head, because I was thinking at the time, he didn't have a very good head-to-head, and he's only beaten him once. Once. They played each other 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 times. The head-to-head is 11-1. So going into that, it was 10-1. Dimitrov wouldn't have believed he could win. There's no way on this earth he believed even when he saw that Djokovic was injured, all he was probably thinking is, and all that was in the back of his mind was a scar tissue from all of the matches that he's been absolutely dismantled by Djokovic. And the fact that he has continually lost this guy, and the fact that he's probably not good enough. If you guys have watched Breakpoint, you'll see that even the top players have doubts. Now, if you're playing someone like Djokovic and you have a 10-1 head-to-head losing record against him on his favorite surface, on his favorite court, at his favorite tournament, you think that you're going to go into it and have some sort of fresh and, rosy approach to it, that, yeah, I can beat him. No, and that's why he got absolutely destroyed, despite Djokovic, almost hobbling at times in that match. I was almost screaming whilst doing the commentary at him to say, like, what are you doing? Because he was just going down the middle of the court and letting Djokovic dictate proceedings with a bad leg, whereas Dimitrov should have been the one on the front foot doing it. And he had set points in the first set. He lost it. And then from there on, Djokovic just dominated him. And it was a really poor display, honestly, from Dimitrov, and a very, very tepid display from him. But Djokovic did exactly what he needed to do. He knew how to play him. He probably knew about the scar tissue. And mentally, he completely mentally broke him down as well, I think. And he made him probably feel like he just wasn't good enough. And I know a lot of players have said that Federer had the same thing, Nadal as well. There's that intimidation factor. There's that, aura about them. And I do feel like the generation that Dimitrov is in, that generation of players have that scar tissue with those big three, because they were seen as the guy to challenge them initially, and they never did. Not really, right? He's part of that Del Potro, Cilic, Nishikori group of players, Dimitrov. He is. But he never won a slam. He's never made a Grand Slam final. He's looked good. He's got some notable wins. He's won some tournaments, but he's never made it big time. And I don't think he's going to for the rest of his career. However, the rest of the guys, and that's why I was talking about Rune having a better chance against Djokovic than Rublev, they're fresh. Rune, Sinner, Alcaraz, Korda, they don't have that scar tissue. They might have played Djokovic and Nadal a few times, but they've only lost to them a few times. Rublev, had played Djokovic 3 times. The head-to-head was only 2-1. He was just comprehensively broken down. And he is tailor-made for Djokovic as well. Big forehand, into-out forehand. There is a slight weakness in the backhand. Djokovic just exploited it and made him make mistakes, made him feel uncomfortable. It was a clinic, honestly. Served extremely well. He's arguably got a top 5 elite serve now, I would say, Djokovic. That's how good he's serving. His spot serving is fantastic. He's not hitting huge numbers in terms of aces, but on returnables, also first serve points 1 is well up there in terms of the tour stats, if I'm not mistaken. And if we look at his stats against Rublev, he was at 80% first serve points 1, which is really, really good. Against de Minaur, where I think he arguably played his best match, he said that was his best performance. 75% first serve points won, but 67% second serve points won, which is, I mean, even more impressive, to be honest with you. And then, it's just one of those things. Like, his serve now has become a weapon, and it never was. It was more of a rallying. It was a shot to start the rally, so that he could then eventually break down his opponent. It's a rally starter. No, it's not. It's a rally breaker in a lot of instances. It really is. It's a shot that will get him on the front foot or get him 3 points at times. And it's so difficult now to break. His transitioning is well in the net game, and I keep on saying it has improved a lot as well. He looks very comfortable in and around the net. He's got so many options now. He dictates with the forehand. Before, he would be happy to go backhand cross and trade with you. Now his movement around the backhand and willingness to hit with the forehand with aggression, with malice, and really dictating those points means that he's the aggressor and he's on the front foot, and then he has the movement and capability to defensively stay in the point and transition from defense to attack very quickly. So he's become this extremely well-rounded player. And when I watched him against TFO, and I actually did, by the way, and I have done an analysis, a very specific analysis on his game with video footage. Recommend you guys checking it out if you haven't done so already. It's on the channel. I was almost in awe of just how effortless he was making it look at times. And it doesn't look like he's hitting the ball particularly hard, but he's hitting it hard enough with enough pop and good enough placement to really make the opponent on the other end of the other side of the net feel extremely uncomfortable. Extremely uncomfortable. And that's how all these guys feel. Alex de Minaur after said if this is the level that he's going to play at, he's going to win the Australian Open. How can you disagree with him? How can you disagree with him? So that's Djokovic in a nutshell, what he brings to the table. The other stat is, by the way, he's made, this is his 10th, this is his 10th semi-final. He's never lost the Australian Open when he's made the semi-final. So whenever Djokovic makes the semi-final of the Australian Open, he goes on to win it. Never lost a semi-final, never lost the final. That is also a very ominous stat, and Tommy Paul will know that stat as well. By the way, they've never played each other before, and Jane makes a really good point about that. So we're going to get to that in a second. In fact, let's get to it now. About Tommy Paul, because we're going to talk about Tommy Paul and his run to the semi-finals and also his game as well, and what he brings to the table. Jane says Ben Shelton looked tired and says Fazan not now eating his salad. Only have two hands. I'm still here listening. Jane says Fazan, do you think that Novak is still uncomfortable playing people he hasn't played before, or do you think he feels he can just play his game and beat everyone? It's a good question. I think in the past, I think it was more of an issue because his game wasn't as aggressive as it is now. He wasn't in attack, if you will, in points as much as he is now. So it meant there was a little bit of reliance on understanding how the opponent played to then calculate the best way to break them down, rather than getting 3 points on serve in rallies, playing really aggressive tennis at times as well. Now, however, I do think he's better playing new people, but I still don't think it's comfortable for him. I still do think it takes him a little bit of time to really calculate and get to grips with how someone's playing and their play style. I think he's almost, and that's why, people call him robotic and he's this machine. It's funny because I do think when he plays someone new, it's almost like the first few games, the first set, he's downloading all the information to formulate a game plan. And then once he's done that, he's like, okay, great. Okay, commence sequence. And then next thing you know, he springs into action and he's carrying out this to the T game plan, which dismantles his opponent. We have seen him have slow starts in the past, of course. He was 2 sets to love down against Sinner and Wimbledon in the quarterfinal there. He's dropped sets against people. He dropped a set against Nori at Wimbledon as well. He's dropped a set this year against Quad in the Australian Open. Look, I mean, do I think that he's going to really struggle in the first set against Tommy Paul? Probably not, but we'll see. Guys, by the way, I can see all of you in the chat. Thank you very much. Keep the questions and comments coming. Remember to that like button and do subscribe if you're new as well. Really do appreciate everyone's support, everyone tuning in. We've gone over the women's, but if you have women's questions, what I would do is I'd wait until the end if you have questions specifically on the women, and then we can address those at the end. But we're focusing on the men at the moment. So any questions on Djokovic and Tommy Paul, fire away in the chat. And then when we do Tsitsipas versus Khachanov, then obviously fire away with those as well. So for Tommy Paul, then let's go. Let's talk about his run to the semi-finals. So his run has been interesting. He's played some very, very good players, some tough encounters as well. I mean, Janine Struff in the first round isn't easy, won in straight sets. Rybakina, he won in 5, a real battle there. Brooksby, who I thought would be more of a nuisance, more of an issue, beat him in straight sets pretty comfortably. And then RBA as well, after beating Murray and having that real momentum going into this. Tommy Paul dispatched him in 4 sets as well, and then Ben Shelton beat him in 4. So as Jane said, maybe Ben Shelton was a bit tired, given that he's never played or progressed in a Grand Slam this far. I guess neither has Tommy Paul, but he's got a bit more experience. So that would make sense. Let's then talk about here we go. Gary said here, thank you, Fazan, for acknowledging that Novak was injured. It was so obvious to anyone who is objective. He's been a lot better since playing Dimitrov. Ghost says Dimitrov has basically become an archetype for players who significantly underperform relative to their hype. Fazan, do you think Joker was sending a message to the Australian crowds by destroying Dimona? Maybe. Probably not. He was just in the zone and just destroyed him. And unfortunately, Dimona was on the other end of the court at that point. He just felt it. It's like TFO was the same with the Laver Cup. When I was watching, he got absolutely destroyed. And that's what TFO had made the semi-finals of the Australian Open, took Alcaraz to 5, was playing some really good tennis. He just turned up, and then Djokovic was playing on unreal, on a really slow hard court, just destroyed TFO. And he has those days where he just turns it on. He's feeling the ball really well. And that's just what happened. In terms of Tommy Paul, then what does he bring to the table? Well, he's not as big a server as Ben Shelton, but he's got a pretty decent first serve. We saw it against Rafa in the Paris Masters indoor stuff as well. What he does well, I think, is he hits his spots pretty well. Against Shelton, he has some impressive stats on serve. 66% of first serves made. He'll need his first serve to be around that level to be competitive against Djokovic. 86% of first serve points won. That's really good. 68% of second serve points won. Now, his stats are not going to look as good against Djokovic, as you can probably imagine. But if he's able to produce numbers like that on serve and do what's in his control, that will give him a good chance of holding serve. And that's half the battle, right? So what I would say is Tommy Paul, half the battle is going to be his serve. And how well is he able to hold serve? How well is he able to hit his spots? And then he's going to have to hope that, given that Djokovic hasn't played him before, it's going to take Djokovic a bit of time to get a read on his serve. We saw something similar against Kyrgios at Wimbledon. Now, Kyrgios' serve Kyrgios' serve is a lot better than Tommy Paul's. It's arguably the best in the game. But Djokovic had played him prior, right? He's played him a few times, Kyrgios. So maybe, well, only a handful of times, but maybe that was why he was able to adapt to it quicker. Whereas against Tommy Paul, it could take him a set. Maybe. We'll see. He might have to bank on that. In terms of skill set, he's got some really smooth hands at the net, Tommy Paul. I do like him at the net. I think he's good. The only issue is he's coming up against one of the best passers ever from the back of the court. His elasticity, obviously, and his ability to manipulate the ball even, and the direction of the ball past you is pretty damn impressive. If I say so myself, But what he has been doing really well in this tournament, Tommy Paul, is really limiting the unforced errors and trying to maximize the winners. 43-26 was his showing against Ben Shelton, which is really impressive. And 82% of net points won, 23 out of 28. So the backhand is the surprise package with Tommy Paul. It's very, very solid. It's arguably better than the forehand. It's very reliable. It's pretty flat. He is able to generate some early backswing on that side. That means he's able to redirect the ball early and maybe rush you in a way that you probably weren't expecting. And also, he's able to find some good angles on that side as well. It's a flatter backhand, but it's good on this surface as well. It definitely gets the best out of what is on offer on these surfaces. Is he going to be able to stick with Djokovic in the backhand to backhand? Maybe, but what Djokovic will do is he'll open up on the in-twin forehand, get him on the run on the forehand, and then come to the net or break him down a different way. I think I don't see how Tommy Paul wins this, if I'm being honest with you. It's almost like when I was talking about Andrei Rublev in my preview for Djokovic when I did a detailed preview. I just had no idea. I had no idea how he could win. And I was right. I just don't see how Tommy Paul wins. I think he's going to have to be creative. He's going to have to serve a volley at times. He's going to have to approach the net at times, rush the net, and volley intelligently behind Djokovic. Maybe as well on the ground stroke rallies, try and hit behind Djokovic, get him on the run, get him stretching on angles. But even then, it's really hard to see and visualize how he ends up winning a whole host of points against him, honestly. His serve is going to have to be on point. He's going to have to really try and his best to get him to struggle on the return. And then on his return, I don't know how well Tommy Paul is going to be able to return that serve because it's maybe not as big MPH-wise as Ben Shelton's, but it's definitely more efficient. He's going to make a lot more first serves, and also they're going to be a lot higher quality in terms of where the spots that he's hitting, the spin, the overall feel of that serve. It's going to be a lot harder and a lot more uncomfortable to face. So I would suggest that Tommy Paul is going to have to play a blinder, arguably try and hit Djokovic off the court, because I don't see him grinding it out against Djokovic, and I don't see him out serving, out returning him. He's arguably the best returner of all time, Djokovic. So yeah, it's not looking good. The odds are very much stacked against Tommy Paul, but maybe he can come out, maybe he can't. I would imagine Djokovic will win in straight sets. That's my prediction anyway. Let's go through the comments. Peaches says, hello, Fazan and QualityShot family. Hi, Peaches. One thing Novak deserves more credit for, this is Gary, and how one thing Novak deserves more credit for, and it's how prepared he is to have a clear strategy against every opponent. Hint. He says he's been watching Tommy's matches this week. Interesting. Shelly says, Gary, maybe Tommy is watching him. I'm sure he is. I'm sure he is, Shelly. I love Shelly. Shelly's funny. Guy says, Djokovic's style is machine-like. I'm not a huge fan of it aesthetically, even when I must honor its brilliance. I mean, it's a style that's clearly working. He used to be more machine-like in the past. I feel like he's a bit more smoother now, especially on serve. James says, did you know that Gary uses 2 forks to eat salad? Interesting. Peter says, Jane, I use a spoon. Okay. Walker says, let's be real. Tommy Paul is practice for Djokovic. This is from Orchid Panda 22. We don't need to belabor this point. I think it just means we don't need to labor this point a lot, I guess. I think that's a bit harsh to say he's practice. Whilst I'll bring up the Djokovic Tsitsipas screen in a second as well. But I get what you're saying. You know, it's obvious he's a huge favourite. You know, Ghost says I use chopsticks to my soup and a spoon for me. Okay, interesting. Anyway, Ghost says we like tennis. Belaboring details of the game is what we do. He sunned you. Interesting. Very good. Hugh Depains. Oh, you're new, aren't you? Some new people in the chat. Guys, if you're new, by the way, then if you haven't done so already, please do hit that subscribe button because we've got more streams like this. We've got play-by-play commentary streams coming up. We're doing Sabalenka versus Vekic tomorrow. We might, if you're lucky, do the other semi-final as well of Rybakina versus Azarenka. Then on Friday, I'll be doing at least one of the semi-finals, and we'll probably cover both. And then the finals, you've got me for both the Sunday and Saturday finals. And of course, I'll be doing a final preview. I'll be doing post-tournament. Hopefully, I'll get some people on, collaborations, tournament reviews, all sorts. So come on, get involved. Hit that subscribe button and also like the video if you haven't done so already. Really does help us out. And if you want to be even nicer, you can actually join the channel. Which there's no obligation to do so, but it really does help us out. We are growing, and any support is very, very greatly appreciated. So thank you to all our members as well. Gary and Jane and Peaches, really appreciated. Ghost says, if you're Paul, why not? But yeah, Paul's match against Djokovic would be like David with he says Paul's match against Djokovic would be like David with his slingshot against Goliath. But then David beat Goliath. That's not a good example, is it? But I get what you're saying. I agree. I think if he beats him, it's one of the biggest upsets I've seen in a long while. Ghost says, if you're Paul, why not develop some kind of wacko tactic to throw Noel off? Perhaps reintroduce the saber at key moments. Oh, you know what? That's the thing is, this is not a bad shout, Ghost. And to be honest, I get exactly where you're coming from because what you're saying is you're suggesting that Tommy Paul needs to do something left field to try and disrupt the rhythm that Djokovic will have against him, right? Really make Djokovic think outside the box and make him try, well, really confuse him, I guess, during the match. Now, something like this tactic, I guess you're using it as an example. I think Djokovic's serve is too good to do it against. Maybe on the second serve, potentially. Why not? Is Tommy Paul good enough to execute it, though? Because we're talking about a tactic that Federer utilized. Not too sure about that, to be honest. But yeah, he could do some wacky things to throw him off. I guess it's a balancing act in the sense that he could do that, but if he's doing and he's making a lot of errors in situations where he wouldn't normally make an error, then it ends up being detrimental rather than being productive. He needs to find the right balance, and it's very difficult. It really is, because there's not really a single aspect of Tommy Paul's game that I think is better than Djokovic's. So maybe his overhead is the only thing. So unless he's going to try and get into loads of situations where he's hitting a lot of overheads and Djokovic, and he's lobbing the ball up to Djokovic, which I'm assuming no one's going to do, then yeah, I'm unsure really what he does. Walker says, I love tennis. I geek out on stats and head-to-head, etc. But the fact that Djokovic versus Paul is in the semis this year is pure fluke. Shelley says, Tommy Paul's coach used to coach Jim Courier. Nice. Not too shabby. He must be relatively old then. Greg says, Paul's been building for a couple of years now. He beat top guys and he's earned his spot. Okay, all right. Fighting talk. Jane says, let us children try and figure out a way Tommy Paul can get a set of him. He says, us. Literally, how can Tommy Paul win a set? Okay, so I think the answer to that question is that Djokovic needs to lose the first set because he's playing as a new player that he needs to potentially adapt his game to and also formulate a game plan against. So he might end up losing the first set. He did a very similar thing last year. A lot of the slams that he won, or the two slams he won, he almost took a set off or lost a set. And a lot of the times it was against someone he hadn't played against, like, for example, Jack Draper in the first or second round of Wimbledon, I guess, whatever, his first match of Wimbledon. He lost the first set, didn't he, to Jack Draper, and then obviously went on to destroy him. Right, so Ghost is another potential strategy for Paul. Try to smack him. What? Get Nole angry and hope the emotionality. That's not a word. What's emotionality? Leads to more mistakes. Smack him. Do you physically smack him? If so, I think he'll get defaulted. Do you mean smack him with a? I don't know. Anyway. Okay. Okay, Jane says, ooh, Kokkinakis and Joker should have an overhead smash battle for laughs and charity. Kokkinakis overhead. Are you talking? I'm assuming you're referencing that point where Murray gets all the overheads back. I didn't think it was that bad, but it might be. Guys says, I mean, Paul got past Shelton, who has a bazooka of an arm, big server, that Ben Shelton. He is. But it's also his first tournament outside of the US, and I guess first Grand Slam as well outside the US. And I think, did he play in the US Open? Maybe in the qualifiers, but maybe second Grand Slam. So, yeah, not a lot to take from that, I guess. It's a good win, but at the same time, it's not an if he'd beaten, say, Rublev in the quarterfinals, I'd be more impressed. Okay, let's go through Stefanos Tsitsipas versus Karen Khachanov, because I think this is the more interesting matchup. I think it's one that, in all honesty, could prove to be a lot closer. And Khachanov has a decent chance in this, I think. And before I go into that, Jen says, what if Tommy Ball only hits moon balls? That's exactly what I said earlier. I think unless he just lobs it and hits moon balls. Well, I think if he hits moon balls, I think Djokovic will destroy him, to be honest with you. And he'll probably, by doing that, Tommy Paul, he'll probably get Djokovic's smash to an even better like standard than it is now. Gary says, Fazan, did you read about that stat about Novak against top 10 players at the Australian Open? No, I didn't. What's the stat? Tell me. Because I am impressed with Paul's Australian Open run. He has improved his fitness, and I hope he can get a set off Nole. He will probably be so shell-shocked playing Nole, but Nole will beat him. Yeah, that's a good point. Agreed. Okay, let's go through Khachanov's route to the semi-finals. He played Zapata Morales in the first round and won in straight sets. He beat Kubler in the second round, beating him in 4 sets. Then he beat TFO in 4 sets as well. I think this could arguably be his best win of the tournament, because TFO has been playing some really, really good tennis in the last 6 months. I mean, who would have expected Karen Khachanov to win and make the semi-finals of the US Open last year? And then also, who would expect him to make the semi-finals of this tournament at the Australian Open? What I would say is he's just made back-to-back Grand Slam semi-finals. And I think in my quarterfinal preview, I said something, and apologies to those who've already heard it, because obviously I like repeating myself. But Karen Khachanov is a player that overperforms in the Grand Slams. His level rises beyond what his base level is. Whereas someone like Hadkach does the opposite. His base level is at a certain level in other tournaments. It drops during Grand Slams. Khachanov really rises to the occasion in the best of 5 format. He beat TFO in 4, and that tiebreaker in the 4th set, TFO, if I'm not mistaken, had set points. He was 6-3 up, I think. Khachanov then beat Nishioka in straight sets. And look, against Korda, it's a tough one to say whether he, in my opinion anyway, excuse me, sorry. In my opinion anyway, it's tough to say that he, would have won that or not if Korda wasn't injured, because we don't know when Korda exactly got injured, but it was a right wrist issue, which means that he wouldn't have been able to play, and that's why he ended up retiring. But the positive for Khachanov is that he then gets back some time to be more fresh. For Tsitsipas, he has played some really good tennis. The only sets he's lost has been against Sinner, which went to 5, but he beat Hallis in the first round, Hijikata in the second, Greixspor in the third. He's had a pretty easy run, I have to be honest, apart from Sinner. Against Sinner, he was 2 sets of love up. He'll be really disappointed, I think, to be taken to 5, but he did switch off a little bit, but in the end, he managed to come through in 5 sets, so no harm, no foul, I guess. And against Lehechka, he won in straight sets as well. So overall, a pretty good run from Tsitsipas. Hasn't played anyone of real note apart from Sinner, but he's been very, very good. Generally, his serve, his forehand, his rhythm, his variety doesn't look very, very good. So the big question is, how do these guys match up? Well, we can look at their most recent matches, and Tsitsipas holds a 4-1 head-to-head record against him. He beat him in Rome last year. That was on clay. Doesn't count. I don't think it's really relevant, honestly. Tsitsipas beat him in Toronto in 2021 and Rotterdam as well, both on hard court. Also beat him in the UK on grass in 2019. Khachanov beat him on grass even in 2019 in 3 sets. And in Shanghai, Tsitsipas beat him in straight sets in 2018. So, look, the hard court matches, there's 3 of them. Tsitsipas has won all 3. So, what you could say is, and that's my son's toy has just gone off on the floor. So, you can hear a 10-year-old's toy. Well, not 10-year-old's, a 10-month-year-old's toy. Right, how do you switch this thing off? Okay, there you go. Sorry, apologies for that. So, Tsitsipas has been pretty comfortable in this tournament so far, and against Khachanov, he has the upper hand, right? I guess the big difference is they haven't played each other in a Grand Slam, and that's where Khachanov really does raise his level. So I think he's going to come up against a different Khachanov Tsitsipas. There's going to be some very interesting matchups and to talk about in terms of patterns of play. But one I want to really highlight first is, and I guess for people that maybe are not as familiar with the players, their skill set. For Tsitsipas, I've mentioned it before, I'll mention it again. He has a top 3 serve and forehand combination on tour. It is that good. Could arguably be even the best. His serve and 1+ striking is phenomenal. It really is. It really, really is. His forehand is also probably top 3, top 5. And he is starting to add bits to his game. His drop shot's starting to look good. His backhand is getting shored up. His return has improved. The block backhand return, I'm really happy that he utilizes it when he needs to. He has been, in my opinion, he has improved quite a fair bit, honestly. He had some really, really poor results at Grand Slams last year. Apart from the Australian Open when he made the semi-finals, the rest of the Grand Slams were poor, really poor. Went out before the quarterfinal stage in all of them. It was just a poor display from him, especially given that he made his first Grand Slam final at Roland Garros in 2021 and he was 2 sets low up in it. To then, not get past, the quarterfinal stage of any slam after Australia last year was just a shocker, genuinely. But he had a really good end to the year in the indoor stuff, and then the start of this year has been good at the United Cup and now the Australian Open. He's in good rhythm, he's in good spirits, his confidence is there, I have to say. And I think Mark Philippoussis has been a good addition. The biggest actually plus for me about Tsitsipas' game is his willingness to come forward and transition. He's got really good hands at the net, great touch and feel, and I do think that added layer does give him an advantage over a lot of the other players. For Karen Khachanov, he is a very interesting player to watch and to see. He has some very extreme grips. His forehand especially is very extreme, but it's working currently. One thing that's definitely going for him, and I think he himself would admit has drastically improved in the last couple of years, is his serve. His serve, for someone of his height, he should be hitting, a fair amount of aces, a fair amount of unreturnable serves, and really make that serve work for him. I don't think that was quite the case until about maybe 6 to 9 months ago, but he's finally found rhythm on that shot, and it's been phenomenal. It's been really, really good. He's been hitting a large portion of aces, 10 or more in every single match of the Australian Open, from what I can see. And that is a phenomenal stat itself. But what's even more impressive is how he's been backing it up, because his forehand has been very good. We know he's got a very good into-in forehand, but what's more impressive, I think, is his backhand. The shot tolerance on that side is very, very good, and he's got a very, very solid backhand where he can trade and also win big points on it. In terms of coming forward to the net, he doesn't he doesn't transition as well as Tsitsipas does. He's not as comfortable coming forward, honestly. He will come forward when needed, that's for sure, and he's not going to shy away from it. But at the same time, I don't think it's his go-to. I think his go-to is to sit back from the baseline and break you down that way, honestly. But we'll see, I guess, because he has been coming to the net a little bit. I guess Nishioka came to the net only 11 times. It's not much. But we'll see Tsitsipas definitely come forward. And then it's a question of, can Khachanov pass him at the net? Is Tsitsipas' volley quality good enough to give himself either an easy second volley or it's a winner, so he doesn't need to do anything after that? We'll see. We'll see. In terms of matchups, well, I think Tsitsipas needs to try and dictate proceedings with his serve, with his forehand. I think Khachanov will do well to. I think Khachanov would do very well to return Tsitsipas' serve consistently well, make a lot of balls, especially on the first serve anyway. But if anyone's going to do it, it might be him at this stage, given the confidence he's playing with, given his backhand is very, very solid, and Stef most likely will try and target that early on. I think he might be pleasantly... I think he might be unpleasantly surprised, Tsitsipas, that Khachanov will be returning as well as maybe other people who didn't expect it. Other people maybe didn't expect him to return as well as he might do against Tsitsipas. I reckon he's got a decent chance of getting inroads on the Tsitsipas serve. I do. For Khachanov, he's going to target the Stef backhand. Stef needs to just block it back into play. Forget about taking big swings on the backhand side, especially on the first serve return. Just block it back into play. Get into that rally. Get it deep into play. If it's loopy, it doesn't matter. And then see what you can do from there. For now, anyway, that's all he can do, I think. For Khachanov, there's going to be some of those forehand exchanges. He won't want to get caught up in those because Tsitsipas' forehand, as I said, is an elite tool. He'll keep on dragging you and dragging you and dragging you, and then he'll go down the line even. He'll change direction at the right moment, and then you just end up looking silly. So that's something he won't want to engage in, I would imagine. He'll want to be a bit more clever in that sense. So, yeah, I imagine that Tsitsipas is going to win just... I wouldn't be surprised if Khachanov wins. I think it's like 60-40 for Tsitsipas, in my opinion. But yeah, I would go Tsitsipas even to beat Khachanov in 4 sets. I think he might take the first set. Khachanov, after that, Tsitsipas comes back. Right, let's go through then the comments, and then we're going to wrap up because I am tired. But thank you very much, guys, for tuning in. Do appreciate it. Also, keep the comments coming. I'm just going to go through all of them now. My prediction is Tsitsipas in 4 sets. I said, yeah, that's right. Let's go. GT Op says cancelled Australia Day, not the Australian Open. Maybe the Toss Cup would be a better name. Don't get it. Shelly says, see, you need to get some sleep to wake up for matches. Night, Shelly. Gary says, Novak, 18 consecutive wins against top 10 players at the Australian Open. Just to ponder that for a moment. Wow, very impressive. He's also won. He also has the biggest streak for matches won at the Australian Open. He's overtaken Agassi at 26. Jay says, I was carrying all the way in that Keegs match. Peaches can back me up. Tommy Paul only hits moonballs. I guarantee none of the other American men will ever talk to him again, Law. That Nishioka match was super weird, says Ghost. Yeah, Khachanov double bageled him in the first 2 sets and then a tiebreak in the third. Strange. Jane says, JJ Wolf will avoid Tommy Paul in that case for fear his regrown stash will just fall up. Fall in proximity. Ghost says hot takes. Tsitsipas is the new Grigor Dimitrov. No way. I think he's going to win a slam. I really do. At least one. Gary says, I think Stef is the second best player in the world at the moment. If he wins, it could be a war against Nole. One thing for sure, Karen is not going to back down. Agreed. Yeah, I think if Tsitsipas wins in even 3 or 4, I think it's going to have to be some tiebreakers because I think, yeah, it'll have to be some tiebreakers. Anyway, Peaches says, I like Khachanov. He has a powerful arm and does not seem to be intimidated with top 10 players, but sometimes he seems to overhit balls. That's a very, very good point. Yeah, he doesn't seem overawed, does he, at all by the occasion? He's not someone who is shying away. He's pretty happy to talk to people. Yeah, I don't know. Intriguing. Absolutely intriguing. To see, I guess, tennis players themselves have to do it sometimes. Instead of being in the cushy establishments, they'll have to train in adverse conditions, I guess. Is it adverse? Maybe. I don't know how adverse that is, but anyways. Right, okay, so we've gone through all of those. There are some comments from before about Tsitsipas, so let me just go to those. I do appreciate all your comments as well. Let's see, where are you? Okay, so... Okay, so in terms of comments then, any more comments, new comments? Gary says, awesome stream, Fazan. Your knowledge and opinions are some of the best on YouTube. Thank you. That's really kind of you, Gary. That's really, really kind. And guys, there's like over 100 of you in the stream, I think. Hit that like button. Do subscribe if you're new. Really do appreciate it. If you've got any questions on the men's or women's, what I would do is fire them away now because I'm going to give you guys maybe 5-10 more minutes, if that's okay, depending on how many questions come through. And then I will wrap it up. But if you have any questions about the women's or men's semifinals, have any comments that you want to address or let everyone know about, then stick them in the chat and we'll get through all of them. Jay says, yeah, Fazan, thanks for answering my questions. No problem at all. Hopefully, I hope I didn't miss anyone's. Peter says, thank you, Fazan, for the pre-match stream, but I have to walk my dog. Enjoy the match, folks. Walk your dog, do ya? Do ya? Very good. I think someone made a comment about Stef earlier. I'm just trying to find it. Whilst I wait for some of your guys' comments to come through. And then we'll wrap it up so everyone can sleep. Well, I guess I still need to do a couple of things before I sleep. Classic. Absolutely classic, eh? No, I can't find it. There was definitely one on Tsitsipas. And I can't find it. I can't find it. The last 10 minutes will be me singing. No, I'm just joking. It won't be me singing, I promise. Okay. That's it. Let me quickly have a look. Are there any interesting kind of factoids to talk about I might have missed? Sabalenka. Yep. Okay. Having joined Agnieszka, I'm going to butcher her name. Having joined Radwanska and Iga Świątek as Australian Open semi-finalists from Poland, Magda Linette will attempt to become the first player from her country to reach an Australian Open singles final. Can you imagine if Magda Linette makes the final before Iga Świątek? Crazy. Isn't that crazy? No one would have expected that. No one would have expected a Polish player to be in the final whose name wasn't Iga Świątek, right? Or am I wrong to think that? I don't think so. Okay, so... Gary says 3:30 a.m. start time here in New York. Oh my gosh. New York City time. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Wow. Yeah, I have to say it's been the timings are nuts, aren't they? But you know what? As you say, it's what we live for, hey. Rybakina says she's an amazing player. It's a semi-final of a Grand Slam. Talking about Azarenka, you've got to give it your best. I'm going to play against another powerful hitter, so I've got to be prepared for that. Yeah, she should be fine. She should be fine. Oh, what's this? Breakpoint saved. Oh, this is interesting. Wow, okay. So this is really intriguing, but I don't know if this is necessarily a good thing. Tsitsipas has saved 43 breakpoints on the men's side. The next best is Khachanov at 25, Tommy Paul at 21, Djokovic at 14. Now, saving breakpoints is clutch, yes, but at the same time, the fact that he's had to save that many breakpoints to me makes me feel like he hasn't been backing up his serve as well as he should have, because he's having to get himself out of ditches, out of problems on serve. Djokovic is at 14, I think, probably highlights the fact that he's not getting himself into trouble. I mean, you could also, I guess, the best thing for them to do in this case for this stat would be to have that stat and then next to it have maybe how many times they've been broken. I don't know. It's an interesting one. It's a double-edged sword, this stat. Sabalenka for the women's even breakpoint saved for the women is Sabalenka at the top at 22, Azarenka 20, Rybakana 10, Linette 9. Yeah, because you might have saved more, but that's obviously just because you're then not serving particularly well, or there's a game where it has like 5 juices, and then you hold. I feel like that's a lot more impressive than the first option, anyways. Right, okay. Gary says Djokovic hasn't had any breakpoints hardly. He really hasn't. He's been pretty solid. Has good old Nole. Anyways, guys, I really, really do appreciate you guys tuning in. It's been fantastic, as always, to have everyone on. If people don't have any more questions, we're going to wrap it up. But before we do, remember to that like button. It's a big thumbs up button. It doesn't cost you anything, I promise. It's the one that looks like this. And if you haven't done so already, do subscribe to the channel. It really does help us out. You'll get some cool content. You get alerted to when we upload as well, when we stream. And I promise you won't regret it, because I feel like we give you guys some pretty good content on here. So hopefully you guys enjoy. Okay, thank you very much, guys. Stay safe and well. We'll see you on the next video. Before I do, though, Devin in the house says, Sabalenka, love the coverage. Thank you, Devin. Very much appreciate it. Great to have yourself and everyone else in the chat as well. And love having you guys on here. See you guys very, very soon. We'll see you tomorrow morning for the semi-finals of the women's.